I woke up unable to breathe, a pillow pressed hard against my face, smothering me in darkness. My lungs burned. My hands clawed at the sheets, and through the fabric I heard my sister's voice, calm, almost cheerful. If you were gone, my share would be much bigger. 47 seconds. That's how long Lillian held the pillow over my face. I know because I counted every single one, convinced each breath would be my last. She only stopped when footsteps echoed down the hallway, my grandfather shuffling toward the room. The pillow lifted. Lillian's face appeared above me, flushed, smiling, already composing her excuse. "Erica, are you okay? I heard you having a nightmare." I tried to scream. I tried to tell him what she'd done, but my voice was gone, stolen by terror and the desperate gasping for air. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They didn't believe a single word. But here's what none of us knew. Grandpa had installed a hidden camera, and at his will, reading 3 weeks later, that camera would play every second of what Lillian did. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to love you unconditionally? My name is Erica Perry. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a project coordinator at a small architecture firm in Seattle. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. It's mine, and I built it myself without any help from my family. That last part matters more than you might think. The Friday, I drove down to Portland to visit my grandfather. The autumn air had turned sharp, and the leaves were just beginning to fall. I hadn't been home in almost 6 months, and as I pulled into the familiar driveway, I felt that old tightness in my chest, the one that always appeared when I was about to see my family. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter. My younger sister Lillian was the star. Beautiful, charming, always knowing exactly what to say to make our parents beam with pride. When she got B's in school, they celebrated her effort. When I brought home straight A's, they asked why I couldn't be more social like my sister. When Lillian maxed out her first credit card at 19, they paid it off and called it a learning experience. When I asked for help with college textbooks, they suggested I get a part-time job to learn responsibility. After 3 decades of this, I stopped expecting fairness. I just learned to survive in the margins of my own family. But Grandfather Harold was different. He was the only person who ever truly saw me. When I walked through his front door that Friday evening, his face lit up in a way that made all the hours of driving worth it. He was thinner than I remembered, his skin more papery, his movements slower. His heart condition had worsened. I could see it in the careful way he lowered himself into his chair, but his eyes were still sharp, still warm, still full of that quiet recognition that had sustained me through my entire childhood. "There's my Erica," he said, reaching for my hand. "You look just like your grandmother today." She had that same strength in her face. He'd told me about Grandmother Eleanor many times, how she was gentle but never weak, how people underestimated her, how she was the one who truly held the family together. I treasured those comparisons more than he probably knew. Lillian arrived an hour after me, breezing through the door with shopping bags and an enormous smile. What struck me immediately was how attentive she was to Grandfather, almost performatively so. She brought him tea without being asked. She adjusted his blankets. She called him Grandpa with an exaggerated sweetness that didn't match the sister I knew. But I noticed the cracks beneath the performance. Lillian checked her phone constantly, her jaw tightening each time she glanced at the screen. She stepped outside 3 times for hushed phone calls, and once when I passed near the back door, I caught a fragment. "I told you I'm working on it. He won't change his mind. I need more time." Something was wrong. Our parents arrived that evening, and the tension only thickened. They seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact with each other and with me. No one would explain why we'd all been summoned for this weekend gathering. Lillian kept asking Grandfather about his plans for the house, and each time he changed the subject with a tight smile. I noticed other strange things too. A security camera in Grandfather's hallway had been covered with a cloth. The neighbor, Margaret, stopped by briefly, exchanged a long, meaningful look with Harold, and glanced at Lillian with something that looked almost like suspicion. When I asked Grandfather if everything was okay, he just squeezed my hand and said, "Some things take care of themselves, sweetheart." That night I went to bed in the guest room feeling unsettled, unable to shake the sense that I was missing something important, that secrets were moving beneath the surface of this house like currents in dark water. But I didn't know that my sister had already moved beyond planning, and in just a few hours I would wake up unable to breathe, staring into her cold, smiling eyes. I woke up because I couldn't breathe. At first I thought I was having a nightmare, that something was pressing down on my chest in that strange way dreams sometimes do. But then I felt the fabric against my face, soft and suffocating, and I realized with ice-cold horror that someone was holding a pillow over my mouth and nose. My eyes flew open but saw only darkness. My hands shot up, clawing at the pillow, at the arms holding it down. My lungs screamed for air. I thrashed, kicked, tried to twist away, but the pressure only increased. And then I heard her voice, low and calm, almost conversational, like she was discussing the weather. "Grandpa's getting weaker every day. If you're not here when he goes, everything comes to me. It's nothing personal, Erica. You were just in the way." Lillian, my own sister, the golden child, the one my parents had protected and praised and believed for 34 years, she was trying to kill me. I counted the seconds, because counting was all I could do. My body was fighting, but my mind had gone somewhere cold and clear, somewhere that understood I might die in the next few moments in my grandfather's guest room, while my family slept just down the hall. 1, 2, 3. I clawed at her wrists, but she was stronger than I expected, or maybe terror had drained all the strength from my limbs. 10, 11, 12. My vision was starting to spark at the edges, even though my eyes were squeezed shut. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my temples, desperate and wild. 20, 21, 22. I tried to scream, but there was no air, nothing but the taste of cotton and the smell of my sister's perfume and the growing blackness that was swallowing everything. 30, 31. I was going to die. I was actually going to die. Lillian was going to murder me for money, and everyone would think it was something natural, something tragic but explainable, and she would cry at my funeral and inherit everything, and no one would ever know the truth. 43, 44, 45. And then I heard footsteps slow, shuffling footsteps in the hallway outside my door. The pressure on my face vanished so suddenly that I gasped, a horrible rasping sound that barely felt like breathing at all. I rolled onto my side, choking and coughing, tears streaming down my face, my entire body shaking with the effort of pulling air into my starved lungs. When I finally managed to open my eyes, I saw Lillian standing beside my bed with her hand on my shoulder, her face arranged into an expression of sisterly concern. Grandfather Harold stood in the doorway, his frail frame silhouetted against the hall light, his breathing labored from the walk. "Erica, are you okay?" Lillian's voice was pitched perfectly worried and gentle. "I heard you having a nightmare. You were thrashing around. I came to check on you." I tried to speak. I tried to say, "She's lying. She tried to kill me." She held a pillow over my face for almost a minute, but my throat was raw and my voice wouldn't come, and all I could do was stare at my grandfather with desperate, pleading eyes. He looked back at me, and something passed between us, something I couldn't quite read. His eyes were filled with pain and sadness, and something else, something that almost looked like understanding. He reached out and took my hand, squeezed it once, hard, the way he used to when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. Then Lillian was there, gently guiding him away, her voice soothing and sweet. "Let's get you back to bed, Grandpa. Erica just needs rest. It was only a bad dream." I watched them disappear down the hallway, my sister's arm around my grandfather's shoulders, playing the role of devoted caregiver so perfectly that even I might have believed it if I couldn't still feel the phantom pressure of that pillow against my face. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in the corner of the room with my back against two walls, watching the door, jumping at every sound. By the time morning came, I had convinced myself that I couldn't stay silent. I had to tell my parents. Surely they would believe me. Surely this was too serious, too horrible for them to dismiss. I was wrong. I found them in the kitchen with Lily, and all three of them drinking coffee like it was any normal Sunday morning. I stood in the doorway and told them everything. The pillow, the 47 seconds, Lillian's words about the inheritance. I watched their faces as I spoke, waiting for the shock, the horror, the protective anger that should come from any parent hearing that one daughter had tried to murder the other. Instead, I watched Lillian burst into tears. "How could you say that?" She sobbed, her voice breaking beautifully. "I was checking on you because I heard noises. I've been here taking care of Grandpa for months while you've been absent in Seattle, and this is what I get accused of something so horrible?" My mother's face hardened. "Erica, you've always been jealous of your sister, ever since you were children. But this is a new low, even for you." My father shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe the stress of work is getting to you. You've always had an overactive imagination." I stood there, frozen as 34 years of being dismissed and overlooked and disbelieved crashed over me like a wave. They weren't even going to consider the possibility that I was telling the truth. They had already decided, the way they always decided, that Lillian was the victim and I was the problem. It got worse. Lillian wiped her tears and said that my false accusations were upsetting Grandfather, that the stress could be dangerous for his heart condition, that maybe it would be better for everyone if I left. And my parents agreed. They actually agreed. My mother helped me pack my bag. My father carried it to my car. Neither of them would look at me as I walked down the hallway for the last time. I passed Grandfather's room. He was sitting by the window, and when he saw me, his expression shifted into something I couldn't quite understand. Sadness, yes, guilt maybe, but also something else. Something almost like determination. He mouthed words at me through the glass, but I couldn't make them out. Before I could go to him, before I could try to understand, my mother's hand was on my elbow, steering me firmly toward the front door. I drove away that morning believing I had lost everything. My family's trust, my grandfather's final days, my sense of safety in my own skin. I had been attacked by my sister, and then punished for telling the truth, and there was nothing I could do about it. No one would believe me. No one would protect me. I was completely and utterly alone. But as the miles stretched between me and that house, something shifted inside me. The despair began to harden into something else, something sharper. If no one was going to fight for me, then I would fight for myself. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know what weapons I had. But I knew that I was done being the invisible daughter, the overlooked sister, the one who accepted whatever crumbs of fairness her family decided to throw her way. Lillian had tried to erase me, and my parents had helped her do it. I was not going to let them succeed. I didn't know that 5 days later Grandfather would be gone, and he would leave me something far more powerful than money. He would leave me the truth. 5 days after I drove away from my grandfather's house, he was gone. The doctor said his heart simply gave out, that the stress of that weekend had accelerated what was already inevitable. I never got to say goodbye. I never understood what he was trying to tell me through that window, what words his lips had formed that I couldn't read. I spent 3 days in my Seattle apartment crying and blaming myself, wondering if things would have been different if I had fought harder to stay, if I had found a way to reach him before it was too late. Then attorney David Chen called, and everything changed. He introduced himself as my grandfather's estate attorney and asked if I could come to his office in Portland. I almost said no. I couldn't face that city again, couldn't face the possibility of running into my family. But then he said something that made me grip my phone so hard my knuckles went white. "Miss Perry, your grandfather named you as the executor of his estate and the primary beneficiary. He visited me privately about a month ago to update his will, and he left very specific instructions that must be followed precisely." I drove to Portland that same afternoon. Attorney Chen was a calm, methodical man in his 50 seconds with kind eyes and a careful way of speaking. He explained that my grandfather had left me the house and the majority of his assets, with smaller portions designated for my parents and nothing at all for Lillian. When I asked why, he simply said that Harold had his reasons and that those reasons would become clear at the will reading. But first, as executor, I had legal authority to access the property and begin managing Harold's affairs. I left his office with my mind spinning. Something didn't add up. Why had grandfather visited the attorney just a month ago, right before the family gathering? Why had he left such specific instructions? And why, I suddenly remembered, had someone covered the security camera in his hallway with a cloth. I called Margaret, the neighbor who had exchanged that meaningful look with grandfather during my visit. She answered on the second ring, and when I identified myself, her voice softened with something like relief. "I've been hoping you would call," she said. "Your grandfather told me that if anything happened to him, you might have questions. He made me promise to answer them honestly." I asked her about the covered camera. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That camera was a decoy, Erica. Your grandfather told me he installed a second camera about 8 months ago, hidden in the hallway where no one would think to look. He called it his insurance policy. He said he was preparing for something he hoped would never happen, but feared it might." My hands were shaking when I ended the call. I drove to grandfather's house, using my new legal authority to enter while my family was away. The place felt empty and sad, filled with the ghost of a man I had loved more than almost anyone in the world. I went straight to his study, to the old wooden desk where he used to let me hide during childhood games of hide and seek. There was a false panel in the back that I had discovered when I was 7 years old, a secret space that grandfather had winked at and told me was our little hiding spot. I reached behind the desk, pressed the panel, and found a small hard drive waiting for me like a message from beyond the grave. I connected it to my laptop with trembling fingers. The files were organized meticulously, labeled in grandfather's precise way: attack footage, phone recording, video diary for Erica. I clicked on the first file and watched my world crack open. The footage showed the hallway outside the guest room where I had slept. The camera, positioned perfectly to capture the open doorway, the timestamp read 2 a.m. the night of the attack. I watched Lillian walk into frame, pause at my door, then enter my room with deliberate steps. The camera caught her, raising the pillow, caught my legs thrashing visible through the doorway, caught 47 seconds of my sister trying to end my life. The microphone was sensitive enough to pick up her whispered words, clear and damning. "If you're not here when he goes, everything comes to me." Then grandfather appeared in the hallway, shuffling toward the room, and Lillian released me instantly, her entire demeanor shifting to concerned sister as she guided him away. I watched the footage 3 times, tears streaming down my face, something loosening in my chest that I hadn't even known was tight. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I had proof. The second file was worse. It was time-stamped 3 weeks before the attack, long before I had even arrived in Portland. The footage showed the kitchen late at night, Lillian pacing by the window with her phone pressed to her ear. She clearly thought everyone was asleep. Her voice was low, but the microphone caught every word. "If she dies before Grandpa, everything comes to me. He's getting weaker. The doctors say maybe a few more months. I just need to make sure she's not around when he goes. It has to look natural, something that happens in sleep." A pause while the person on the other end spoke. Then Lillian again, irritated. "No, Derek. I know what I'm doing. Stop pressuring me. Once I get the money, I'll pay you back everything plus interest. Just trust me." I stopped the recording. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't a moment of panic or a mental breakdown or temporary insanity. My sister had planned to murder me for weeks. She had discussed it with her boyfriend, worked out the details, chosen a method designed to look like natural death. She had invited me to Portland specifically to kill me. The third file broke my heart in an entirely different way. Grandfather sat in his study, looking directly at the camera, speaking to me. The recording was dated 4 weeks before the attack. "My dear granddaughter," he said, "if you're watching this, I'm already gone. I pray you never need to see these recordings. That would mean Lillian changed, that my fears were wrong. But if you're watching, I'm so sorry. He took a breath, his eyes glistening. I installed this hidden camera 8 months ago after I discovered Lillian forged my signature on a check. I confronted her privately. She cried, apologized, promised to change. I wanted to believe her. I didn't want to destroy this family over what might have been a one-time mistake. But I also prepared for the worst. I don't know exactly what she might do, but I know she's desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. He leaned closer to the camera. I've updated my will, left instructions with Attorney Chen, and positioned this camera to capture whatever might happen. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you more while I was alive, Erica, but this is my way of protecting you after I'm gone. You've always been like your grandmother, gentle but never weak. She would be so proud of you. I am so proud of you. The truth is my final gift to you. I sat in that empty study and sobbed until I had nothing left. Then I called Attorney Chen. He reviewed the footage in silence, his face growing paler with each recording. When it was over, he told me that grandfather's will included a notarized letter requiring this evidence to be played during the will reading as a condition of inheritance distribution. Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing, Chen said quietly. He built a legal trap, and Lillian walked right into it. Chen contacted the police. They reviewed the evidence and obtained an arrest warrant for Lillian. 3 days before the scheduled will reading, they would wait in an adjacent room during the reading, ready to execute the warrant once the evidence was formally presented to all parties. The will reading was set for the following Tuesday. My sister would walk in, expecting to inherit a fortune, still believing her plan had almost succeeded. She had no idea she was walking into the exposure of her own crimes, or that police were already waiting with handcuffs. Tuesday arrived with a gray sky and a cold wind that seemed to match the storm brewing inside me. I drove to Attorney Chen's office early, my hands steady on the wheel even though my heart was racing. I had spent the past 3 days preparing for this moment, rehearsing what I would say, how I would react, whether I could keep my composure when my sister walked into that room believing she had gotten away with trying to kill me. I parked my car and sat there for a few minutes, breathing slowly, reminding myself that grandfather had built this moment for me. All I had to do was let the truth speak for itself. The conference room was quiet when I entered. Attorney Chen nodded at me, his expression carefully neutral, though I caught something in his eyes that might have been encouragement. I took a seat near the window and waited. My parents arrived next, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze. They sat down without greeting me, my mother clutching her purse like a shield, my father staring at the table. I wondered if they felt any guilt at all for throwing me out of my grandfather's house, for choosing Lillian's tears over my truth. I supposed I would find out soon enough. Lillian swept in 5 minutes late, dressed in an expensive black dress with a designer bag on her arm, looking every inch the grieving granddaughter who expected to be rewarded for her performance. She glanced at me with barely concealed contempt and said, "I'm surprised you came, after everything you put us through." I said nothing. I kept my face blank and my hands folded in my lap. Let her have this moment of confidence. It would make what came next even more devastating. Attorney Chen closed the door and took his place at the head of the table. He had a folder in front of him, a laptop connected to a screen on the wall, and an expression that gave nothing away. "Before we proceed with the distribution of assets," he announced, "Mr. Harold Perry left specific instructions that certain materials must be presented to all beneficiaries. This is a legally binding condition of the will. The video evidence cannot be skipped or dismissed." I watched Lillian's face. A flicker of confusion crossed her features, but she quickly smoothed it away. She probably assumed it was some sentimental video grandfather saying goodbye, maybe expressing his love for the family. She had no idea what was coming. Chen clicked a button, and the screen came to life. "This footage is from a security camera Mr. Perry installed in his home," he said, and then the video began to play. The hallway outside the guest room appeared on screen, dim and quiet, the timestamp showing 2 a.m. on the night of the attack. I watched myself sleeping through the open doorway, peaceful and unaware. Then Lillian entered the frame, walking with deliberate steps, no hesitation, no uncertainty. She paused at my door, looked both ways down the hall, and then moved into my room. The camera caught everything through the doorway. The pillow rising, my legs beginning to thrash, and Lillian's voice picked up crystal clear by the microphone. "If you're not here when he goes, everything comes to me. It's nothing personal, Erica. You were just in the way." 47 seconds of footage showing my sister trying to suffocate me in my sleep. Then grandfather appeared in the hallway, shuffling toward the room, and Lillian released me instantly. Her entire demeanor changed in a heartbeat, concerned sister rushing to my side, guiding grandfather away with soothing words about nightmares and rest. The performance was flawless, and now everyone in this room could see exactly how flawless it was. My mother made a sound like she had been punched in the stomach. My father's face drained of all color, and Lillian, my beautiful, confident, golden child sister, crumbled before my eyes. She started crying immediately, reaching for our mother's hand, her voice high and desperate. "That's taken out of context. I was having a mental breakdown. I have so much debt." I was desperate. I wasn't thinking clearly. "I need help, not judgment. I'm sick, Mom. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For one terrible moment, I thought it might work. I watched my mother's hand move toward Lillian, instinctively, decades of protecting her baby, kicking in despite everything she had just witnessed. My father cleared his throat and said, "This is clearly a mental health crisis. Maybe we should handle this privately as a family. Get Lillian into treatment." Lillian sobbed harder, sensing the opening. "I'll get therapy. I'll do anything. Please don't destroy my life over one terrible moment." I was desperate. The debt. Derek kept pressuring me. I snapped. "But I'm not a monster. I'm your daughter." I sat in silence, my heart pounding, watching the same script play out that had worked for Lillian her entire life. The tears, the excuses, the promises to change, and my parents wavering, wanting to believe, looking for any reason to make this something other than what it was. But this time, there was more. Attorney Chen spoke, his voice cutting through Lillian's sobs. "There is additional evidence per Mr. Perry's instructions." He clicked to the second file, and the screen changed to show the kitchen of grandfather's house late at night, 3 weeks before the attack. Lillian stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, pacing with agitation. Her voice filled the conference room, recorded perfectly by the hidden camera's microphone. "If she dies before Grandpa, everything comes to me. He's getting weaker. The doctors say maybe a few more months. I just need to make sure she's not around when he goes. It has to look natural, something that happens in sleep." "No, Derek, I know what I'm doing. Stop pressuring me. Once I get the money, I'll pay you back everything plus interest. Just trust me." The timestamp was impossible to deny. 3 weeks before the attack. This was not a mental breakdown. This was not snapping under pressure. This was a premeditated plan to murder me for inheritance money, discussed calmly with her boyfriend, worked out in detail while I was living my quiet life in Seattle with no idea my sister was planning to end it. My father stood so abruptly that his chair crashed backward onto the floor. My mother was crying, shaking her head back and forth like she could somehow unsee what she had just witnessed. And Lillian's face had gone completely white, all the color draining away along with every excuse she had ever used. "That's not... I didn't mean Derek made me say those things. He was pressuring me." But her voice was hollow. Even she could hear how empty the words sounded against the evidence of her own recorded voice. In the devastating silence that followed, my mother suddenly spoke. I knew. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring down at her hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "God forgive me. I think I always knew something was wrong with Lillian. The lies when she was young, the cruelty to Erica that I pretended not to see, the way she manipulated everyone around her, but I was afraid. If I admitted my daughter had serious problems, it meant I had failed as a mother. So I pretended. I chose not to see. I blamed you, Erica, because that was easier than facing what I had raised." She finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry. I failed you. I failed both of you. I was supposed to protect you, and instead, I protected the one who was hurting you. It didn't excuse 34 years of being dismissed and overlooked, but it explained them not favoritism born of love, but denial born of fear. Attorney Chen stepped out of the room and returned a moment later with 2 police officers who had been waiting in the adjacent office. "Lillian Perry," one of them announced, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." The handcuffs clicked around my sister's wrists. She looked desperately at our parents, but neither of them could meet her eyes. The will was read in the aftermath. I received the house and the majority of grandfather's assets. His handwritten note was read aloud. "To Erica, who never abandoned me, and who I trust to carry forward what truly matters. To the rest of my family, may this truth teach you what I could not." As the officers led Lillian toward the door, she turned back and looked at me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. I met her gaze steadily and said the only words I had for her: "You chose this path yourself." I watched them put my sister in the back of a police car. Derek had already fled the parking lot the moment he saw the officers, proving he had only ever wanted her money, not her. My parents sat frozen in the conference room, their family shattered around them. Justice had been served. But as I drove to grandfather's house, my house now, I still had one question that haunted me. What kind of life do you build after something like this? 3 months passed, and slowly I began to answer that question. What kind of life do you build after something like this? You build it carefully. You build it on your own terms. And you build it with the understanding that some things can never be repaired, only replaced with something new. Lillian remained in custody, awaiting trial, denied bail because the judge considered her a flight risk. Her public defender advised her to accept a plea deal rather than face a jury with that footage. The charges were severe: attempted murder with premeditation, elder financial abuse for the forged check, and conspiracy to commit murder. She was looking at 10 to 15 years. Derek, the boyfriend she had trusted with her darkest plans, turned on her the moment police brought him in. He blamed everything on Lillian, claimed she had manipulated him. The man Lillian had been willing to kill for had never loved her at all. He had only loved the money she promised him. The community that had once admired my sister now saw her for what she truly was. Her social media accounts, filled with years of photos showing her lovingly caring for grandfather, became monuments to her hypocrisy. Former friends distanced themselves publicly. The golden child had been exposed, and no one wanted to stand beside her anymore. A letter arrived about 2 months after the arrest from the county jail. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me read it. Her words were careful. "I always thought if I had what Erica had, Grandpa's love, that quiet strength everyone seemed to value in her, I would be happy. I thought money would give me what I was missing, but I realize now that I destroyed myself trying to take what was never mine to take. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did." I read the letter once. I waited for some emotion to rise up, anger or satisfaction or even pity. But I felt nothing, just a quiet emptiness where my sister used to live in my heart. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. Forgiveness is not required for healing. Some doors are meant to stay closed forever. My parents reached out about 2 months after the will reading. They wanted to meet, to explain. I agreed, but on my terms. I chose a coffee shop in Portland, neutral ground, where I could leave whenever I wanted. They arrived looking smaller than I remembered, aged by shame and grief. My mother started crying before she even sat down. My father couldn't meet my eyes. They apologized. They tried to explain, not excuse, just explain the fear of admitting something was wrong with Lillian, the easier path of blaming me instead of facing the truth. I listened to all of it. Then I spoke, keeping my voice calm and clear, without anger but without softness. "I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. You chose to believe Lillian over me for 34 years. That choice almost got me killed. I understand now why you did it: fear, denial, the inability to face what was happening in your own family. But understanding doesn't erase the damage. I paused. I'm willing to have a relationship with you, but it will be on my terms. We can have dinner once a month. We can talk occasionally, but I will never again be the daughter who accepts being invisible, who shrinks herself to make others comfortable, who swallows her truth to keep the peace. They agreed. The relationship was not destroyed, but fundamentally changed. I held the power now. It felt strange. It felt right. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I was cleaning grandfather's study, my study now. Behind the same desk where I had found the hidden hard drive, tucked into a corner I had somehow missed before, I discovered a small wooden box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was an old photograph, edges worn soft with age. A young woman looked back at me, a woman with my eyes and my quiet smile, Grandmother Eleanor, probably in her 30 seconds, standing in front of this very house. Beneath the photograph was a handwritten note in grandfather's careful script. For my beloved granddaughter, the one who will keep this house standing. Your grandmother was underestimated her whole life. People saw her kindness and thought it was weakness. They were wrong. She was the strongest person I ever knew. You have her spirit, Erica. She would be so proud of the woman you've become. I am so proud of you. Keep the house, keep her memory, keep being exactly who you are. All my love, Grandpa. I held that photograph for a long time, tears running down my face. Then I walked to the living room and placed it on the fireplace mantel, right next to Grandfather's picture. Two people who had seen me. Two people who had believed in me when no one else did. That was enough. That had always been enough. Evening light streamed through the windows as I stood in the living room of the house that was now mine. I looked at the photographs on the mantel, Harold and Eleanor watching over me still. I looked at the garden through the window, the one grandfather had planted years ago, still blooming, still growing. I thought about the woman I had been 3 months ago, the invisible daughter, the overlooked sister, the one who had learned to make herself small. That woman felt like a stranger now, not because I had become someone different, but because I had finally become myself. I spent 34 years measuring my worth by whether my family saw me. I twisted myself smaller and quieter, hoping someday they would notice. I accepted crumbs of attention and called it love. I swallowed my truth to keep a peace that was never real. But I learned something through all of this. The people who truly love you don't need to be convinced of your value. They see it. Grandpa saw me. Grandma saw me. And now, finally, I see myself. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is an invitation to be destroyed. I have learned to protect my peace, and I will never apologize for it again. That was the beginning of the life I had almost lost forever. Finally returned to me. I was 34 years old, standing in my grandfather's house, surrounded by the love of people who were gone but never truly absent. I had survived my sister's attempt to erase me. I had faced my family's decades of denial. I had inherited not just a house, but a truth. My worth was never dependent on being seen by people who refused to look. I had myself. I had my grandfather's faith in me. I had my grandmother's strength running through my veins. And I was never, ever going to let anyone take that away again. Erica's story reminds us of something we often forget. Your worth is never determined by those who refuse to see it. If you have spent years being overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel invisible by the people who should have loved you most, please know this truth. Their inability to see your value says everything about them and nothing about you. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones sitting at our own dinner table. And sometimes protecting yourself means walking away from those who were supposed to protect you. But here is the most important lesson from Erica's journey. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is an invitation to be mistreated. You are allowed to set limits. You are allowed to demand respect. You are allowed to choose yourself, even when others call you selfish for doing so. It is never too late to reclaim your life and rewrite your story on your own terms. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Share your experience with our community. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.